Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 90. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are covering chapter 30 of Goblet of Fire, the Pensieve.
Or, as we like to call it, constant judgment of your predecessors. So this chapter starts off in Dumbledore's office. And honestly, I don't think I would be able to function in that office with a bunch of sentient paintings watching and judging me all day. I could not handle that. And I mean, besides that, the office sounds gorgeous, but I do have some questions. Because if the walls are round, does that mean that the paintings are all on curved canvas? And are the bookshelves curved? And like, if the paintings are on curved canvas, the canvas has to be perfectly sized to like the size of the circle and curvature of that room, which is like next level, like detail, and seems hard from just like a interior decorating perspective. Seems a bit rough.
Now that I think about it, Dumbledore's office with the portraits there reminds me of my stupid open concept office. Open concept office, bad idea.
Yeah, very much. It's even worse than that because it's almost like Dumbledore's in a fishbowl in the middle and everyone else is staring at him all day, you know? Their portraits are all turned to face center at him. It's not even like everyone is facing everyone at different times equally, like in a general office. This is like
a nightmare.
On a pedestal, everyone's watching. Everyone who had your job before you is watching you and judging you and second guessing every decision you make and criticizing everything you do. Like, that's insane. I could not do that's like the hardest part of his job because he's pretty shitty at it, if we're being honest. But like that would be the hardest part of the job, not keeping the students alive or fighting for what you think the school should be versus what the government thinks it should be, or keeping the students alive. It's literally just like facing the constant judgments and criticisms of your predecessors. Yeah.
At the last chapter, Harry was eavesdropping on Moody, Fudge, and Dumbledore's conversation. He's been let in because Moody called him out for eavesdropping. And when he comes in, Fudge changes to sound super pleased, where before he was being kind of rude and like prejudiced, speaking with Dumbledore. So it shows that, like, you know, Fudge is kind of two-faced. He's a politician, and he's fine to see Harry now that, you know, Harry is still, you know, good for his brand.
Yeah.
Also, he asks Harry how he's doing, and Harry's like, oh, fine, but he's obviously lying. And it's like, Harry's in this death tournament.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I'm not dead yet, so I guess it's good. Like,
but why is he even asking him that? Like, maybe like, you're seeing him for the first time since, like, before the tournament started, and just be like, oh, hey, Harry, how's it going? Are you okay?
Sorry about the, you know, death for everyone's personal enjoyment risk we're putting you at. You know, we were sorry about once again serving you up like an appetizer at a sporting event. Our bad.
But Harry low-key kind of calls Fudge out because he kind of knows now that he's been outed as eavesdropping. He's just like, I don't think Madame Maxine had anything to do with Crouch disappearing.
I love how sassy he is about it too. He's like, I think she would have trouble hiding, like, because she's so tall. I was like, yes, Harry, yes.
A 14-year-old calling out the Minister of Magic. I just love it.
Bring that sass.
As Dumbledore and Crouch and Fudge leave, Harry's just left in Dumbledore's office by himself, and there's kind of just like this reintroduction to Dumbledore's office where they kind of recap the first time he was there in Chamber of Secrets and all the things that are there. And so we're reintroduced to Fawkes the Phoenix, and we're also reintroduced to the sorting hat that's there, the portraits on the wall, and I just feel like a lot of these things come back in Order of the Phoenix. So I feel like, but it just feels kind of unnecessary at this point where they spend like maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs going back over Dumbledore's office. It's like, we get it. But these things do come up in Order of the Phoenix, and they play a pretty big part in that. So I get it, I guess.
Yeah, I get it. The foreshadowing is nice, but it is a bit of repetition.
Like we do talk about a lot about Goblet of Fire is that there's a lot of recapping, which we don't really feel is necessary as much as it's done.
I mean, it's interesting how much of the things recapped in this chapter are very important, not just in Order of the Phoenix, but in like Deathly Hallows. Like the Sword of Gryffindor becomes really important. The Felix Nigilius portrait on the wall becomes really important. So like it's really valid stuff, but they did sort of info dump a lot of it in one like short paragraph. I will say though, I find it incredibly relatable that the moment Dumbledore leaves, Harry starts chatting with the bird. He's like, human's gone, I'll just hang out with the pet. Hey, how's it going, Fox? Like, yes, relatable.
I feel like when you're left alone, in a room and there's an animal there, you're just like, well, I guess I'm going to hang out with this animal.
We're just going to hang out. We're pals. It's fine. But I also kind of like that when Harry goes to snoop around, he looks back over his shoulder at Fox, like he wants to know if Fox is going to like contest his snooping or something. And I'm like, he's just checking if the bird is a narc.
Unlike Mrs. Norris, Fox is cool with it. I was actually thinking, when coming back home from this, that in general, when you're left alone as a kid nowadays to like wait for someone, I feel like because we have so much technology that like if I was waiting in a room, I would just be on my phone. But as a kid, like when I was at people's houses and I was just like waiting around, I loved looking around at stuff. Like I wouldn't touch things or like really snoop. I just like looking at like the way rooms were laid out and like pictures and like little knickknacks and stuff.
Yeah, a modern Harry would be on BuzzFeed taking a quiz, like find out what crayon you are.
But Dumbledore's office is the best place to snoop, I think. There's just so much stuff to look at.
Yeah, there really is.
And Harry has this moment where he looks at the Pensieve that he sees out of the corner, and he's just like, you know what? I'm not going to touch it because bad things happen in the wizarding world when you touch stuff that you don't know what it is. And I feel like that's progress for Harry.
Yeah, honestly, don't stick your hand in the weird unknown substance is a good piece of safety advice for muggles and wizards. Like, generally, yeah, good call. I also do kind of love how beautiful they describe the memories in the Pensieve, though. Like silky and sort of like clouds that are liquid, or just like he doesn't even know if it's liquid, if it's solid, if it's gas. He can't figure it out. It's like, it's just so pretty sounding and like the cool silvery glow of it. It would be very pretty and I would stare at it for hours.
Harry's just such an interesting kid because he's looking at this like thing and he's like, oh, this is weird, this is kind of cool, but he's just so nosy, he wants to know what it is, and he's trying to look as much as he can without actually touching it, where I feel like most people would be kind of like, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to stay away from it. None of my business. But Harry's just like, I need to know what this is. And then, of course, he accidentally touches it and then gets sucked into the memory.
I don't think I would stick my face in it, but I do think I would look and peek in the cupboard because it sounds so interesting. And like in a dark office, you know, it glowing in the corner and there's movement. I'm like, okay, I have to take a peek. You know, the mystery novel lover in me is like taking a peek.
Harry just goes above where he's so curious about like what the memory is that he's trying to lean in closer to see if he can make out what it is, and that's how he falls in. Where I feel like most people, you give it a little look, be like, but you know, Harry's just like, he can't help himself.
It's very Gryffindor of him to like just do it and not think it through first. I think I would also go and peek at it, but as a Slytherin and an anxiety girly, I would overthink how I'm going to get out of the situation if I get caught and shouldn't be doing it. Like, am I going to say, oh, I was just closing the door? Or am I going to say, like, what is my lie that I say that's not just, oh, I was curious? You know, do I pull an Angela Lansbury and try and be cute and bumbling? Like, oh, sorry, I was just, you know, like the bird, or do I blame the bird made me do it? Like, who knows, you know? But I would like, I think that's sort of the difference between the curiosity of like a Slytherin and maybe a Ravenclaw versus someone like a Gryffindor. They're like, this is really interesting, I gotta know. And the Slytherin's like, I'm gonna know, but I'm also gonna know what my options are to get out of it if I get in trouble, or if it ends up looking bad, or if it's dangerous, because forethought over planning.
Obviously, a big part of this chapter is going into Dumbledore's memories of these court trials. And Harry, when he first lands into the court trial memory, he sees Dumbledore and he assumes that it's really Dumbledore there. And I'm just like, Harry, you just saw Dumbledore leave with Fudge and Moody. Like, why is that his like first? Like, he doesn't think that it's like real. Like, obviously, he comes to the conversation eventually that it's memory.
But I think there's circumstances where that has happened. Like, that's exactly what happened to Albus Dumbledore when Hermione and Harry time traveled in the Prisoner of Azkaban. They were standing in the room, they left, and then they were right at, like, in front of his very eyes a second later somewhere else. So I feel like maybe he was like, oh, it's just Dumbledore time traveling.
I do feel like it's kind of to establish memories because, like, Harry kind of compares it to when he went back into Tom Riddle's memory back in Chamber of Secrets. And we do know that for Half-Blood Prince, the memories in the Pensieve play like a really big part in that book. So I feel like it's establishing kind of memories, being in a memory, how you're just there viewing it in like a 3D sense, but you can't interact with any of it.
It's a lot like watching a security footage video of the event that occurred, except you're watching it from the perspective like the camera was on someone's glasses, you know?
Well, like a VR almost.
Yeah, VR. It's basically just VR.
But yeah, so Harry lands into a court hearing with Dumbledore, and this is the court hearing where Karkaroff's brought in. And so he's seeing a much younger Karkaroff being brought in, giving evidence to the Ministry, and the Real Moody is there. And I find it really interesting the way this Real Moody speaks to Dumbledore, because we know this Moody is like, we don't get a lot of Moody's character. Most of it, our introduction to Moody is through fake Moody. And he's just kind of like there and in the rest of the book. And he's just like, he's there in and out, but we don't really get a lot of like his personality. And here, when he's talking about like hunting down Karkaroff and he's super pissed that Karkaroff's getting like a deal with the Ministry, he thinks that he should just be like left and Azkaban to die. He's happy that the Dementors are there, and he kind of forgets that Dumbledore doesn't like the Dementors.
I think it's interesting because it shows that they have different perspectives on justice, or what's justice versus what's like vengeance. And I think for Dumbledore, it's more of like a preventative justice. So like if someone who did bad things and is going to keep doing bad things is in prison where they can't do any more bad things, that's okay. But Moody doesn't find that psychologically satisfying because people he knows and he himself have fought these bad guys and have worked against what they're doing. So he's like, just having them not be a risk anymore doesn't change the fact that they did things, and he needs that like psychological release that comes from like the vengeance of it, you know? They did bad things. I need to know bad things are happening to them. Just knowing they're done doing bad things isn't satisfying enough, you know? And it's a different view on justice. And it's interesting because Dumbledore is very much shown as like the very level-headed, like, I don't want anyone to suffer, even if it's the worst person in the world. Or Snape. He does want Snape to suffer. That's his exception. But like generally he doesn't want anyone else to suffer, even if they deserve it. And Moody, I think, as much as we all like to sit on a high horse and pretend we're morally superior, I think Moody is more relatable in this moment. Looking back as an adult, like if I were in Moody's position and I had spent years trying to capture this bad guy and people I loved had been hurt by him and killed by him, I would be like, I'm sorry. He rats out like 3 people and then it's all forgiven. Give me a friggin' break. Like, I can totally understand the hunger for that vengeance, you know? I find it more relatable than Dumbledore's I'm a completely impartial character, and my views on justice surpass all of my emotions, because I struggle with believing that.
Yeah, but interesting some of the names that Karkaroff mentions. He mentions Dolohov, who comes back later on, I think, in Order of the Phoenix. He's one of the Death Eaters that's in the Ministry. And he mentions Rockwood as well. And obviously, the big thing is that he mentions that Snape was a Death Eater. So we finally get confirmation that Snape was a Death Eater. There's been so much foreshadowing about Snape being evil and all these secrets. And now we get the final confirmation that Snape, actually was on the bad side. But Dumbledore stands up and he gives testimony that, Snape was a bad guy, but he switched before the fall of Voldemort, so he's been given a pass.
I love that Dumbledore's word is enough, because a lot of people are probably hold Snape responsible for bad things that happened.
I feel like Moody, I don't know if it's described, I feel like Moody's is side-eyeing him, because we do know.
Rolling his eyes. He's actively rolling both of his eyes that he has in that moment.
Well, he has both of his eyes at this time.
He's like, yeah, sure. He was with the bad guys, and that's fine because you're chill with him.
Yeah, it definitely goes against what Moody believes, where I don't think Moody believes in like rehabilitation or you can change sides. He thinks if you were bad, that you're bad.
Yeah, I also just think people put a lot of faith in Dumbledore's opinions of people.
Yeah. What evidence did he even give to the Ministry? Did he actually tell the truth? Because I feel like Dumbledore kept that very close to his chest.
Because a lot of people didn't realize Snape had been a Death Eater.
Yeah, because most of the Order of the Phoenix, you can tell in Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince that like they don't question Dumbledore because of his, his character. But I felt a lot of them are just like, why Snape? Especially the Marauders who knew Snape in school, and then after Dumbledore dies, no one questioned the fact that Snape was like bad. They're just like he was wrong.
I feel like Dumbledore gives himself this level of superiority where he can say, because I said so, to grown adults in the way parents talk to children, and everyone just says, oh, okay, he said so, that's good enough. And I think it would have served him better in the long run if he'd actually talked to people about why he trusted Snape to some extent. Like, listen, like not giving away Snape's love life and stuff, or lack thereof, but like saying, like, listen, these are things he's actually done. This is information he gave to me about these things. And like, because just trusting something out of blind faith and then actually having the understanding of why you're trusting them are different. And I think a lot of things would have been handled better if Dumbledore had been more honest about why he trusted Snape and given people reasons to also agree with that. Situations like Harry going to the Ministry to save Sirius because the only person he told is Snape and he doesn't trust Snape. If Harry actually trusted Snape in that moment, shit would have been different.
Yeah, a lot of things could have been different. Dumbledore says he gave testimony, but what did I just wonder, because I don't think he told anyone the reason why he believes Snape. Because he could tell anyone that, like, he was in love with Lily Evans, and everyone's gonna be like, yeah, they're just like, so? That's nothing. Like,
no one would care. Like, that's nice. I think also that, like, Dumbledore would look like an absolute dick if he told people the real reason he trusts Snape, which isn't that so much that Snape was in love with Lily, but that Snape is so riddled with personal guilt and self-loathing, and Dumbledore has presented himself as the only way for Snape to earn back being not a miserable person, the only way to relieve himself of any sense of guilt. So it's like, it's not that I just think he's in love with her and wants to, live out in a way that she would be proud of. No, no, no. He's riddled with guilt and self-loathing, and I am using that to control him. And so he'll do whatever I want because that's, like, and you don't want to tell people that because you look like a Machiavellian douchebag, which is the truth, but Dumbledore doesn't want people to know that. Like, Dumbledore's self-public relations game is strong. They can't know he's Machiavellian. They can't know that he literally is just fine with Snape's eternal suffering if it benefits him.
Yeah, because it just feels so weird that he has so much trust in the government trusts him at this point so much that, like, he gave his word, I guess, that Snape was good, and everyone's just like, yeah, okay, and no one questions Snape.
He's like, I pinky promise. He's just a swell guy. He's so sorry, I swear.
That's pretty good, because you think, like, even if Snape, because he did turn before the fall, really, that, like, even so, they probably would want to question him about things, but Dumbledore just says, like, oh, he's good, don't worry.
Yeah, like, if you're a good guy, give us information. Yeah. Because I'm sure he knew he was reasonably high up in the Death Eaters, so I'm sure anything that, like, Barty Jr. has to say about narking on people, or that anything that Karkaroff has to say, Snape probably knows too. Like, he's an ample source of information, and they could be getting that, but Dumbledore's like, you can't talk to him, but he's good, I promise.
You can kind of see here, like, how revered Dumbledore is within the government, and then...
I want to say it's corruption. Dumbledore is not an elected official, and everyone just, like, blindly trusts him and lets him control things that are, like, legal processes.
He's in the court, isn't he? He's like a chief warlock.
Yeah, he's in the Wismagot, I guess. But it does feel a little bit like it's crazy how much he can sway things like legal proceedings and, like, even, like, government plans for education a little bit he should have a say in, but not as much as he ends up having sometimes. Like, there's definitely everybody kind of, like, double checks with Dumbledore before they make big choices, and that feels a little silly.
Yeah, he has a lot of sway within the government with not really being in the government. And then in Order of the Phoenix, that all changes, obviously, for a bit at least. So it's, like, interesting seeing that he was, like, really, he had some sway in these court proceedings. And then later on, they kind of, like...
disappear. But one of the other names that comes up in the Death Eater trials is Ludo Bagman.
So random.
Lugasp. The first time you're reading it, you're like, that idiot? My first thought the first time I read it was like, Voldemort is a terrible person, but he's not stupid enough to trust that guy with anything important. Like, I just don't think so, And so that's just hilarious that's basically what it comes down to, is everyone thinks, oh no, he's just really stupid. He didn't mean it. He's actually really stupid. And everyone's like, okay, we forgive you. But it's really funny because, like,
yeah,
basically Barty Crouch is saying the day Ludo Bagman gets a job at the Ministry will be a sad, sad day. And meanwhile, now we know in the present he does have a job at the Ministry, and you're like, yeah, they'll hire anybody. He's brand name recognition. That's all you need, apparently. Also, when Harry, like, gets yeeted back out of the dream, Dumbledore's explaining how the Pensieve works, and he shows Harry a tidbit of a memory about Snape talking to him. And I think that feels so invasive. Like, Snape was talking to Dumbledore about something personally. He could have shown him anything, and he shows him a Snape memory. And like he already knows Harry mistrusts Snape, and he doesn't even choose one that makes Snape look particularly good. It just seems like shady, talking about it being back and it's darker than before, or what, he's describing the dark mark basically and how Karkaroff has one too and stuff. And it's just like, how invasive would it be to know that every time you talk to Albus Dumbledore, he could put that memory in a bowl and let anyone watch it? Like, I would never be comfortable talking to him. I'm like, what if I accidentally like something embarrassing happens, like I have a whatever, like lettuce in my teeth or something, and then he records it and like watches it with Minerva later and like laughs at me. Like, how do you know that's not the reality? Like, I'd be so self-conscious knowing that this is a thing he does.
I mean, I think the thing you tell Dumbledore is just it will become public knowledge when he wants it to be.
Yeah, he'll use it to blackmail you later, because that's really how he rolls.
But it's so interesting how different the court case proceeding is with Karkaroff compared to Ludo, who's just kind of there like formally, and obviously that's back when things have been like resolved. Voldemort's gone, they're just running up the Death Eaters, and obviously everything's good. And because he's a part of a Quidditch team, he's basically a celebrity. People are treating him, they're kind of letting him slide for it. But Crouch obviously is like, he's by the law, and he's like, if this had been a different time, maybe they would have like been more serious with Ludo. But his celebrity really does save him, where he kind of acts like,
I don't think it's time specific. I see day in and day out stories about professional athletes doing horrible, horrible things and getting away with it, or having their organization or their city pretend like it never happened because, oh, he's so good at this sport. Honestly, like, as someone who watches sports really closely, it feels like one of the most believable like representations of sport culture that I see in this entire franchise of books, entire series of books. It's just like, of course, they love him at sports. Maybe he helped the Death Eaters, but he's so good at the sports. You can't be good at sports and not be a good person. That's just not possible.
yeah. But the last memory is probably the most tense memory, where Harry can see like the whole court is like full. People are really like angry. There's like this buzzing around, and there's 4 people brought in, and the person he notices is like this really young kid who's very scared and is calling out, and we learn that this is Crouch's son. And so Crouch's son is kind of like denying his involvement, unlike Bellatrix, her husband, and I think it's her husband's brother, who he was caught with, and they're all silent. They're all like proud of what they did, and it's just Crouch's son who's calling out, saying that he's innocent. He's calling out for his mom, like he's gonna kill me, like he's gonna send me away. And we do know that Fake Moody is a really good actor, so I'm wondering like how close of a supporter was Crouch Jr. Is he just like playing it up here?
Yeah, I think he's definitely playing it up, screaming for his mother to save him. I mean, we don't know all the circumstances. Like, maybe there's a potential that what happened is he was threatened into giving information as to where the Longbottoms were, and he gave it because they were torturing him, and then they brought him along because they said they'd kill him if they went to where he suggested and the Longbottoms weren't there or something. Like, if it was that level of like, you either tell us or we kill you, and he just was too afraid to die and told them, that's a different level of like not cool than like being there and actively laughing and cheering and torturing people. But I think, based on how we see him later on, when we actually see him now, I think he probably was a supporter. Like, he wasn't just seen as a weaker link because his father had connections at the ministry and then manipulated. I think he probably had resentment from for his father pretty early on, and this was a way for him to act out against his father and make his own reputation and choose his own destiny, sort of. And he chose crime when he could have just chosen to run against him for public office. Like, there are alternatives.
Could have been an actor.
He would have been great, and I bet that would have made his father so mad. Like, that was the best alternative, and he chose instead to just be a horrible, horrible criminal. But like, I do kind of respect Barty Crouch Sr. for not, like, if it had been anyone else's teenage son who had done this, he would have given him the same punishment, And he's embarrassed that his son did it.
Yeah. I feel like a normal person would have recused themselves because this, like the optics of it.
Recusing himself would have been the best option, I think.
But he wanted to show that he's like he was serious and he was vigilant and he could be impartial.
Yeah, he made it a PR move by making sure he was a part of sentencing his son, but I think quietly wishing that someone who does something terrible gets held accountable, even if they're someone you used to know and love, is a good thing. I mean, it shows the strength of his, convictions, I suppose.
But Bellatrix, in comparison to Crouch Jr., is just basically saying like Voldemort will come back and I'll be rewarded and I am a loyal servant. And she doesn't admit to doing anything, but she's just praising Voldemort here. And I do wonder what would have happened to Crouch's career if his son had been the way Bellatrix had been, because from the optics, it just looks like he was maybe caught in the wrong place, wrong time. And how does a person from that kind of family background end up on the wrong side? But if he had been like very much like praising Voldemort, would Crouch have like suffered more in his career?
I think he probably would have had to do like worked a bit harder to. I mean, being on the jury and sentencing his son is part of showing that he wouldn't like showing his loyalty to the ministry and the law, but he might have had to do like a bit more legwork to get to the place that he was, like be a little bit more aggressive against crime, be a little bit more proactive in going against Death Eaters or future evil wizard groups, like he would have to do a bit more maybe. But I think because he was clearly so ready to hold his son accountable, I think people might have, I don't know, seen him the same way. Even if his son said, "Oh my God, I love Voldemort," they'd be like, "Oh, that poor man. He must be so traumatized by his son being a monster."
It's just interesting because we know that before this, he was basically shooed in to be the next Minister of Magic, and then because his son was caught, that he ended up kind of going into the Foreign Relations Department.
See, if Dumbledore was in this position and his son did that, he would have just killed him. He would have been like, "My son was murdered by Death Eaters. That's so sad. Everybody feel bad for me and vote for me for office." That's what Dumbledore would have done. I'm going to make this a good PR move.
So going into kind of what the Bellatrix and the rest of them are being charged with. So they basically say that they are being charged with, torturing Frank Longbottom and his wife for information about Voldemort. And so knowing what we know about the prophecy and how close Neville became to being, the person that it was referring to, what intelligence do we think that Bellatrix kind of had about the Longbottoms? Because it's interesting that Voldemort goes after Harry and basically targets him, makes him a part of the prophecy because he picks Harry rather than Neville. And then did Bellatrix and co kind of know a bit about the prophecy? Because they knew the Longbottoms. It feels like too much of a coincidence for them to go after the Longbottoms after Voldemort went after the Potters.
I mean, they probably had a bit of a description of what Voldemort was looking to do, which is they want to kill a child who was born at a certain time to a family that has a certain degree of like prominence in the anti-Voldemort community. And as far as they know, okay, the Potters are dead, so it's not them. So let's hunt down the other possibilities. And like in my mind, part of what I think Neville's parents were hiding was Neville, right? So I think they knew a little bit. They didn't know that like that kid would be the downfall of Voldemort or that level of details, but they had a vague description of a type of family, and they're like, just we gotta hunt down and slaughter these folks because they match the vague description from Voldemort. And the thing about Bellatrix is I think she is the truest of believers. Like a lot of people like Snape joined the Death Eaters because he was in Slytherin and all the options for friendship were Slytherins, and he didn't have a family and he didn't have friends and it was the only community available to him.
I think also the idea of power kind of like appealed to someone like Snape as well.
Yeah, definitely. He'd felt powerless for so long in his life. He's like, I'll get some power. This is the only group that wants to have me as a friend, and I would like to not be alone forever. Poor guy. But you know what I mean? He joined out of it's sort of the same reason a lot of people join gangs and stuff. They want a sense of community. They want to feel like there's people who have their back, and they want to feel like they're working towards something, some sense of purpose. And a lot of other people join because they're threatened. Some people are probably offered high up positions in Voldemort's future regime. People are offered money. People are just afraid, Some people probably agree with parts of what he's saying. But I think Bellatrix believes it more than anyone. Like she's tried and true. She Absolutely. Like, she would do things, I think, to disadvantage herself totally if they would serve the cause. Like, she is absolutely deranged, completely, like,
Yeah, I feel between Bellatrix and what we learn later about like Crouch Jr. is that they are like the one true like believers. Because I do feel like Crouch Jr. was what Bellatrix was, like do anything, be anything to serve Voldemort.
yeah, I think like people like Lucius Malfoy, for example, like that they get to be rich and have some symbol of authority just because he's pure blood.
Also, he believes in the message as well.
Yeah, I think he's one of those groups of people that he doesn't like the idea that if they let more non-magical people exist in the world, if they let muggleborns exist in the world, those people might become alternative options to him for things that he's used to just having handed to him, like things he gets money for. What if a muggleborn got that job and they get that money? Like, it's this idea that like society could only give positions of authority, good jobs, and like meaningful power to pure blood men. And as a pure blood man, the idea that any other demographic might be viewed as worthy or getting power means that you're losing power. And I think it's a lot of self-preservation and like terrified of the idea of having to earn things.
It's the classism too.
Exactly. He's not used to having to earn things. He's used to most things being sort of handed to him. They were birthrights. His money, birthright. His blood, his birthright. So the idea that he would have to like earn anything for himself is preposterous. And that's what he's afraid of, you know? But there's all these different kinds of believers, and none of them are great. But I will sympathize more maybe with Snape because I feel bad, I guess, that they put him in that house with no one to befriend him that wasn't a Death Eater, basically.
And obviously, after this whole scene, and Dumbledore, the real Dumbledore, appears and he takes Harry to leave. And now I'm just thinking, did Dumbledore leave the Pensieve out on purpose? Because we know he likes Harry to figure things out that he needs to know down the line. And Dumbledore knows Harry's super nosy. Was this intentional?
Maybe. I don't think Dumbledore, like, it feels like he's not sloppy enough to have done it by accident. You know, I feel like he's more conniving than that. So it wouldn't surprise me at all.
I feel like Dumbledore intends to, at least at some point, show Harry memories. So maybe he's trying to go through these and kind of connect the dots. But I feel like down the line, he definitely wants Harry to see these.
Yeah, he's prepping Harry, I think. He wants Harry to gain information. He wants Harry to get the satisfaction you get from finding it yourself, sort of. It's all part of Dumbledore's evil plan.
Once out of the Pensieve, Harry remembers the real reason he actually came to Dumbledore in the first place, which was not to snoop, but, to tell Dumbledore about his dream.
You can have two reasons for doing something.
Let's tell him about that fucking owl that he was writing on. I can't get over that.
There was this fucking owl, Dumbledore, you wouldn't believe.
But something I didn't remember is that Dumbledore, when he's talking to Harry about the dream, he asks if he saw Voldemort in his dream. And I'm wondering, is that him trying to determine if Harry saw the dream through Voldemort's perspective? But Harry tells him that he didn't see him, but he heard him. He just saw a chair. And he's like, but he wouldn't even have a body because he doesn't really exist, right?
Then how did he hold a wand? I do think the perspective is so weird in the dream. I really think the author hadn't planned things out all the way yet, because he saw the back of the chair, which meant he was not seeing from the perspective of Voldemort, and he saw the snake, so he wasn't seeing from the perspective of the snake. So, unless it was wearing the diadem.
Dumbledore does kind of talk about Harry having like a connection with Voldemort, and that when he is close by or when he feels great hatred, that Harry is like sensitive to that. So I think this is kind of trying to establish the Horcrux connection, but it probably hadn't been completely worked out yet. And so it does feel like still like a bit of a plot hole that Harry is seeing this dream not through Voldemort's perspective. But Harry asks about the last court case he saw, which was about Neville's parents, and Dumbledore does confirm that it is about Neville's parents and that they were Aurors, they were tortured for information. And the scene where Dumbledore reveals that they're not dead, but they're worse than dead. Like, he doesn't establish really what happened to them because obviously Neville has not told anyone about this. But I feel like Harry just has great emotional intelligence because he really does feel for Neville, and he feels bad because he's like, how could I have known this person for 4 years and not known this big thing about him? And he spends all this time with Neville, and Neville is such a great friend to him. And he's just like, and he had this whole like past about him that he didn't know about at all.
Yeah, I also kind of appreciate the understanding that like what happened to Neville's parents and what happened to Neville might be worse. Like Harry lost his parents, but Neville lost his parents too. Harry got to have the closure of knowing they're not suffering anymore. They've moved on. He gets to have people.
He has people that tell him about him. He gets to learn about them through memories.
Exactly, everyone tells him wonderful things about his parents all the time. They were sort of seen as heroes, and everyone sees it that way. And it's just the ability to like move on because you don't constantly have that wound being reopened for Harry. And for Neville, he has to go and visit them, and he wants to go and visit them, but he probably also doesn't want to go and visit them because if he has memories at all of them, it's going to be heartbreaking to see that this is what they are now. And if he has none, how heartbreaking is it to see these people you don't even know and be mourning them, but not really know what you're mourning because you've never really had them as, people in your life. And them, it hurts probably, even if they're not entirely cognitive. It's got to be like I have to think I would have rather been killed than left. Like they can't remember their son. If they know anything, it's got to be memories of the torture they were put through. They probably can feel physical pain still. So they just feel physical pain and remember sadness, and they can't even recognize their own son.
And Neville is obviously always told stories about how great his dad is and his parents, and then he has to confront that version of what they remember of his parents that he doesn't really know to the ones that are there that don't remember him.
Yeah, and you hear about like his mom Alice and how, she wouldn't give up where Frank was and she wouldn't give any of that information. And like they both seem so, Alice and Frank, so incredibly brave and noble, and somehow because they didn't die, it's like their sacrifice is seen as so much less than, and no one ever sees Neville as an orphan of the war the way they see Harry as an orphan of the war.
No, it's just a shame. Oh, it's such a shame. I feel like it's bad for Neville too because Harry does live with the Dursleys, who are obviously abusive and neglectful, but he also has like a found family in the Weasleys. But he's raised by his grandparents, but obviously they're family and they love him, but also like they put Neville down all the time and they don't really lift him up or encourage him. Neville's constantly put down being like, oh, you're not like your dad, until he kind of gains some confidence. But I can't imagine how hard that would be being raised by a grandparent who's also had a severe loss of her only son, and then trying to kind of force you into a role that you weren't like meant for.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. And again, like Harry, even beyond just the Weasleys, like the friendship with just Ron and Hermione, like he has such deep friendships, and it's kind of like, who's Neville's best friend? Does Neville have a best friend?
And Neville's kind of like, he doesn't have a best friend. I always feel bad for him because he's friends with everyone, but he doesn't have a group.
You know what I mean? Like he's sort of friends with Hermione, but like not best friends. Dean and Seamus have each other, and Harry, Hermione, and Ron have each other. And like he sort of like people like him and they're friends with him, but he has no one that is his best friend, and he has no group that would say he's a primary part of their day-to-day lives. You know what I mean?
And he's still such like a sweet, nice person too, despite everything. And I feel like that's what kind of throws Harry off, is that he always known that Neville grew up with his grandparents and not his parents, and he's just so surprised that he like never knew and never questioned anything, because Neville is such like, he's just that guy.
Never asked. Yeah, that's kind of the sad part, is that no one, like it's a hard thing to ask the first year you meet someone. Oh, you live with your grandma. Or what's that like, or how did that happen, or maybe the first year you don't know how to ask it or something. But seeing as how everyone knows your parents, for example, Harry, are dead, you know what that's like. So it seems kind of weird that he never said, wow, I wish I had a grandmother alive who could have raised me because my parents are gone. And then bonded somehow over Neville being like, well, it's hard sometimes because she holds me to the standard she held my father to, and he was really cool. And Harry'd be like, oh, how did he pass? And Neville would say, well, like it's to me, it seems like something that comes up.
I feel like Neville really struggles with it too, because we do see like when everyone finds out about his parents, that his grandmother kind of tells him off for not telling people, like he's ashamed about it. But Neville just keeps it very close to his chest, and I feel like he really struggles with like how to, I guess, deal with it.
Yeah. partially because she treated him like he wasn't good enough for their legacy. So of course he doesn't want people to know their legacy, because then they're going to be like, oh, you're such a disappointment compared to that, Like, that's not even his fault. They made him feel that way. If they'd said every day you smile and have fun, your parents are proud of you, it would have been different, rather than saying, why aren't you the coolest wizard ever?
But Harry then moves on after Dumbledore tells him don't tell anyone but Neville's parents, because he should have like the right to tell people when he's ready, which is some good advice. Harry brings up Snape, and it's just kind of like, so about Snape. They said he was a Death Eater. And Dumbledore is just like, very vague, like, oh, he's not a Death Eater, like, or I'd be a Death Eater, like, just kind of sidestepping around it, basically saying that Snape is good because I said so. I'm not going to give you any information or context. And I just feel like he's kind of gatekeeping Snape's loyalty, and Harry does not trust Snape at all. And like we said earlier, like, if Harry had been given like more concrete answers, not even Dumbledore telling him the complete truth, just giving him a bit more context, I feel like it would have helped a lot, because like we said, Harry's distrust in Snape just cost him a lot of incidents in the series.
Yeah. He could even just say, like, he doesn't have to mention Lily, because that is none of Harry's business at this moment. But he could say, like, it wasn't just the good guys who lost people they cared about to Voldemort, and that's enough for Harry to be like, oh, wow, someone liked Snape, or Snape liked a human being. Crazy, but like, okay, cool, carry on. But keeping it this mysterious kind of makes it more, like, in my mind, if someone told me you're not qualified to know this interesting thing, I immediately want to know more.
Dumbledore did say that it's like not like it's private between him and Snape, which I get, but like when Harry finds out the real reason, like why Dumbledore trusts Snape, like in Half-Blood Prince, he's like super pissed about it, and then like he feels betrayed, and he kind of is, because Dumbledore's been telling him this whole time, like, oh, it's between me and Snape, I just know that he's good. And Harry finds out the reason and doesn't believe it, because it sounds like shit, because it kind of is.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, by the way, Snape's actually the reason why your parents were hunted down and probably died. But I trust him, don't worry.
Yeah, he's repented to me, and he's now my personal slave who does all the shitty things I don't want to do for the rest of his life while risking his life and being lonely, and I'm forcing him to be around children too, which he also hates. Don't worry, Harry, I've made sure he's done what Moody wanted to do with Karkaroff, which is make them suffer for a long time rather than just holding them accountable and hoping they become better people. Snape has suffered for a long time in miserable situations with no friends. So I think that moment when Dumbledore tells Harry Neville has a right to tell people when he's ready and don't tell other people, that might be the first and maybe only time that Dumbledore actively tries to protect a student who isn't Harry. You know what I mean? Telling Harry not to do that doesn't make Harry cooler, doesn't make Harry braver, doesn't teach Harry something that's important for him to know in order to defeat Voldemort. It's Neville's personal life. He gets to decide when he's ready. Like, you know what I mean? And I think this is one of the only instances, because Dumbledore does things like says, don't kill my students, and I'm going to not support the government interfering in schools because it messes with my students. But like, it's different being the students as a student body, as the school, because the well-being of the school is partially attributed to Dumbledore. So if you let it all fall to shit, people will be like, wow, Dumbledore's not that great. But when it comes to an individual student, he really only shows interest in Harry. So it's really nice that we at least get one moment where Dumbledore is just like, let's not make life harder for this kid. This kid being Neville.
And Neville deserves just peace and love and respect.
Peace, happiness, love, joy. He deserves to feel good about himself. Not only does he deserve to feel good enough, he deserves to feel like he is exceptional, because he is. Also, we do get a bit of sassy Harry again, and sassy Dumbledore. Honestly, like, right after they get out of the Pensieve, Dumbledore's like, Harry, didn't you want to talk to me about something? And Harry's like, oh yeah, well, I fell asleep in divination.
Love the honesty.
Which is the start of his story. But Dumbledore comes in with this absolute killer. Quite understandable. Just like, yeah, yeah, he's like, yeah, and everyone, makes sense. And I'm just like, okay, Dumbledore. Like, we know how I feel about the man, but that was a good one.
But going into kind of like our last bit of discussion, I just want to talk a bit about the Pensieve and everything kind of surrounding it.
So, yeah, my first thought when Harry sort of sticks his nose in and gets like dragged into the Pensieve is that my first action upon being yanked into the bowl would be the full evacuation of my lunch via my mouth. The motion sickness would have me retching all over the memory, just like all over the damn thing.
Yeah, I see that too. Why is everything in the Wizarding World just like yanking you and putting you in like a motion sickness tunnel?
It's not for us nausea people. It's not.
But I was wondering kind of how the Pensieve just works in general, because if you take a memory from your brain and put it inside the Pensieve, do you still have that memory in your head, or is it just like you forget it, or is it just like a backup, like a backup for your computer where like it still exists on your computer, but it's just like it's just saved in another place?
I'd like to think of that it's a backup because it would seem very hard to give up one of your memories. Like, unless it's like a trauma memory and you're better not knowing. But generally speaking,
Because when I wrote that, I was thinking there's some memories I would like not to have in my brain.
fair. But I think like that would be so weird to give to somebody and let them have it. I feel like I hope it's a backup because the alternative is kind of scary.
It does make sense for it to be a backup to actually kind of like, because when when Dumbledore takes these memories, he wants to look at them and kind of make connections. And I feel like if he forgets the memory and then goes into it, he's like, oh, when did this happen?
Yeah. And then my other thought is like people often remembering things, which leads to like inaccurate memory of the initial event. So I think it's important that you remember the initial event and you can go back to the memory and see it in its pure original form. I think if you forgot the original activity, it would be harder to know how truthful the memory you're looking at is. Because, like, even like when Harry looks at Slughorn's memory the first time and it's the cleaned up version where it's like, no, nothing to see here, Tom. Don't ask me any weird questions. So I think being able to have the original, even if it's a little murky, is important to like confirm the authenticity and the accuracy of the memories. And also just like it'd be weird to like give someone a memory from that day. Like, here's a memory I made today. And then you're like, oh wait, did I eat lunch today? Because that memory included me eating lunch. And now I don't know if I ate lunch.
I wonder if it picks up like those subconscious too, or subconsciously you ate lunch, but you don't really think about eating lunch, but it'd be there in the memory because subconsciously like that happened.
It's also interesting because like you're in the memory from your the perspective of the person who memoried it, but you don't have their thoughts. You don't have their opinions. You know what I mean? Like if Harry was actually in like some other person's memory from that dream, they might have liked it or hated it or had different complete opinions. It might skew how you view the memory. You know, it's very interesting. It's a POV shot, but it's a POV without internal monologue or dialogue, basically. So it's still open to different interpretations. My other question about, I guess, Pensieve physics is like, how do you get out of the memory? Because Dumbledore gets Harry out, but like, how would Harry have done that on his own? Would it have just kept playing other memories that are floating around in there and then like replaying the ones he already saw when he runs out of memories? Like, how do you exit?
Yeah, is it like in shuffle mode or something? Or does it just like end and you're just like, okay, press escape to exit?
Yeah, right? And then also, does the body of the person viewing it stay in the office while the mind is projected into the bowl? Like, did Dumbledore walk into his office and just see Harry's legs sticking out of a cupboard?
Probably. I'm trying to remember how it goes in Half-Blood Prince because I feel like they have to have their legs out, I'm pretty sure. Because I don't get how Harry would get out otherwise.
Yeah, I guess. But, like, we don't really learn in this moment how Dumbledore gets him out. Like, you just, like, in the dream jump, and then, like, in the memory you jump, and then you're out of the... I don't know, man. How do you not hit your head on the cupboard? I have questions.
But I was wondering, like, what was the original purpose of the Pensieve? Because obviously it seems very old and magical. I'm wondering how it was created. What was the purpose of being like, I need to be able to view my dreams in the third person perspective? Or memories, I mean.
Yeah, I need to be able to... Well, no, I need to be able to view memories from the perspective of the person who experienced it originally. So to me, there's a lot of usage for it in like the legal system. Like, I'll just borrow, Karkaroff's memory, hop in and see if he meant to do the bad thing, or see who was there, see how it went down. Especially would be helpful with Barty Jr.'s situation. He's like, no, I didn't do it. Okay, sure, we'll pop into Bellatrix's memory of the event and see if you were smiling and laughing or crying in the corner, and then case closed. Like, that's a really good use. But also just, like, I feel like wizards lived pretty long. Like, even without Nicholas Flamel stuff, I feel like you forget things over time. The longer you live, the more memories you have, you lose memories. So like it might have just been someone who wanted to remember everything. My other question is like, if you really, really love someone and they're about to die, can you take all of their memories and put it in the bowl so you can go back and like visit your loved ones via memories that are more vivid than your own head?
We know Snape gave his memories to Harry somehow at the end of Deathly Hallows, so potentially there's a way to do it. But speaking of like court cases, that's what the one thing I kind of thought it'd be used for. But I do wonder if it's kind of like a gray area, because obviously, as you said, that like our memories are kind of like, they're like through our perspective, so it's how we view things. So there's going to be bias there.
Yeah. And someone can intentionally slightly manipulate the memory before they give it away. I think you'd have to double check, right? So like you'd watch the trial or whatever or the event from one person's mind who was there, and then you'd go see someone else who was a witness and have them give you the memory as well, and you compare the two and you say, weird how this other bystander saw it happen this way, but you remember it this way. And if they match, that's good. And if they don't match, you go and get other people's, you know?
Yeah, I do feel like it's kind of a gray area, because we also have the truth potion, which you think would be used a lot in court cases, but obviously it can be worked around too, where like someone can believe they're giving the truth, or they can give a half truth, and they can kind of work around it. So it kind of reminds me of kind of like lie detector tests and tests like that, where they're not really acceptable in a court of law. Like you can bring them in, but it doesn't really, it's kind of a gray area. It's not taken as like consequences of if you're guilty or not guilty, because it can be worked around.
Yeah. Lie detector tests don't show you if you're lying. They tell you if you're stressed.
So things can be altered. So I feel like is what makes it a gray area. And that's probably why we don't see memories using a lot. Because the one thing I think about is Sirius being able to provide the memory of Peter transforming when he quote unquote killed him, and that would have like, vindicated him. But he obviously didn't have a trial. But also it could be just like, oh, you just like kind of like created that memory, or that's how you imagined it because you're crazy and you're racked with grief and guilt. So another kind of general question, but would you want to use a Pensieve yourself?
I mean, like, depends from my own memories. Like, I occasionally would like to go back and like relive a day of my childhood, like at the cottage climbing trees or something. Like, that would be fun. Also, like, sometimes when I like read a book or watch a movie that I've already read or seen, I'm like, oh, I remember the way I felt kind of the first time I experienced that twist or something. And it's like to go back and at least like feel a bit of that would be fun. Also, just like remembering dumb shit. Like, I can never find my phone. I can never find my phone. And it's unconsciously be put somewhere. But if I can go back throughout my day and be like, oh, that's where I left it. Because now I have to ask Google to call me all the time. Like, Google, call my phone because I can never find it.
I feel like for me, because as an anxiety girly, I ruminate on things I've done a lot. So I feel like it could be potentially very bad for me to actually be able to go into my memory and then relive all these moments that I'm like, I should have done this instead. But I also think it would be nice to go back to like memories where like, I think a lot of people have times where you just like were in the moment. You're like, this is like a really great day or a really great moment. And I want to remember this. And I feel like reliving some of those days would be like really nice.
Yeah, I could go back to the Warped Tour. That would be cool.
Yeah, but my last kind of point here is that we know that Dumbledore has these memories, and these are his memories. But I'm wondering, at this point, was Dumbledore already trying to collect memories about Voldemort to put together kind of like, his villain timeline? Or was this kind of him trying to like figure things out himself? And then once he kind of figures out when Voldemort comes back, obviously, then that's when kind of he's like, okay, I need to kind of figure out his where things went wrong and how things got to this point.
I figure he always sort of wanted to do opposition research, in any way possible, because even when Voldemort was still alive, you need to know your enemy to defeat your enemy. So knowing more about Voldemort can only benefit him. I think it was more just out of curiosity, or like, what are his weaknesses so we know how to fight him when he comes back, or how did he become this way is something that I think a lot of people have curiosity about. But it wouldn't surprise me if this is a way Dumbledore researches things all the time, not just Voldemort, but like other people. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he gathers the memory of former coworkers of teachers applying for the job or whatever, because like he likes to know things that people haven't told him because it makes him feel smart. But also, like, it's just an interesting way to get a view of people and how they are when they're not talking to someone they know is in a position of power, who they know is very respected. It's like a viewing, like see how someone's employees view them before he hires that person who was a manager, for example, because that's going to be different than how they present themselves to him, Albus Dumbledore, the great and mighty. So I think opposition research and even like friend research, like I think he also does that for people in his life who aren't enemies, because there's a time where Minerva's going to say, stop almost killing the goddamn students, Albus. And if he knows how to talk to her in a way that's going to make her accept that he's not telling her important things about Harry, but she needs to keep letting him almost kill the students, he needs to know what to say to her to get that result. And he's not going to tell her all the details of his master plan. So I think he does it with everyone in his life. With great power comes great responsibility, and I don't know if he's very responsible with it, but he sure does use it.
Oh my goodness. Well, we've been talking for like an hour, so let's wrap this up.
All right, folks, thanks for coming out. It's Jay and Tori, and we're done with this long-ass episode.
Next episode, we're jumping into Chapter 31, The Third Task. Yeah, but if you liked today's episode, you can listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a comment, give us a rating. You can reach out to us on social media at Potter Revisited, and if you have anything you'd like us to discuss or talk about, you can email us at potterrevisitedpodcast@gmail.com, and we will see you next time. Okay, bye.